Hello out there. Almost forgot to silence my phone. We'll get started in a minute or two just to give a couple more people the opportunity to join in the fun. Hopefully everyone's having a great day today. Okay, so today we're here to continue part 2 of the introduction to IDEs. In the last stream, which is now hosted on YouTube, I walked through for about a half hour each Microsoft Visual Studio and Microsoft Visual Studio Code. Kind of showed some different features around them, and in order to be fair, I'm going to show JetBrains Rider. I am no way in form associated with JetBrains, nor do I get any royalties for this. This is just one of the IDEs that I use on a regular basis. They do provide me a license for free as a Microsoft MVP, but it's an IDE I use on a regular basis. So when you first start JetBrains Rider, which I'll just call Rider going forward, you're prompted with a dialog box as so. Dialog box pretty much has 2 sections to it, or I like to say 3. You have your recently used files. This will have up to this many. I haven't gone that far yet to see if there's more, because these are pretty much the primary projects I work on with this product. Then you have the main dialog here, which shows version you're on and gives you a couple different options. So if you're here for the Visual Studio talk yesterday, you probably noticed there's some similarities. In Visual Studio, these are gigantic buttons. In Visual Studio Code, they're text to the left. But in either case, you can start with the new solution, open up an existing solution, open up with a file or a folder, or get from a version control like Git or TFS. Then you have this little section here, which is configure. This allows you to go through different preferences within the application. So you have your preferences, plugins, run different configurations. I haven't really touched any of these 3, especially restore default. There's check for updates. It automatically does this as a setting that you can change. But if you're like me, every once in a while, you kind of click on it just to double check. There's the manage licenses feature, which allows you to go and update your license for the product. I think there's a 30-day free trial for it. But when you purchase it, it's an annual license. And then preferences for new products. I'm going to kind of touch the preferences a little bit because there's some good things in here. I like to tell everyone when I introduce them to JetBrains Rider, and I don't know if the people from JetBrains and or Microsoft are going to appreciate this, but I always like to say that JetBrains Rider is as if Visual Studio and ReSharper got together, had a baby. Rider is that baby. It takes the best portions of Visual Studio with some of the stuff that's not so good, and really the best parts of ReSharper, and kind of combine them together in a more user-friendly, developer-centric way of doing things. So let's get started with some of the basics. For the most part, it works just like the Visual Studio editor, where you have these main categories here, You can type in to find a quick thing. If I want to find font, I can type in font and it'll show me anything that has to do with fonts. And it highlights here in this tan. Again, your colors may vary depending on your current editor set. For mine, I'm using their dark theme, I believe, like I had in the other things. The one very different thing with Rider from Visual Studio is that the fonts that you choose actually affect a lot more than just the editor. So here you can see it's using the same JetBrains mono font even for this text, and you have full control over what you want and everything, but the default here is to show it like you would see in the text, so everything has the same. For the most part, a lot of stuff you'll do initially, which I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a walkthrough when you're first setting up to get you to kind of set some of the defaults. So here is where you change your theme. You'll notice there's a lot of default themes to it. I didn't add a lot, and at least I don't think I added any. But you have the ability to go and tweak your own. And the themes here cover both fonts, colors, icon size, as well as a couple other things. You can also override the theme with the basic font. Here I'm overriding it with Monaco, but actually I don't really use that font much anymore. I don't see it in my list. I have to go and fix that. But let's just use Monaco for now. Menus and toolbars you most likely won't need to change, at least right away. It has the ability when you first sign it to kind of initialize it like Visual Studio or Eclipse or other common IDEs. Mine is set for the most part like Visual Studio, only because that's what I've used for so long. Next thing you'll probably change is the keyboard mapping. Here you see I chose the default, for my default Visual Studio for the Mac or OS X. But there are lots of others. You can choose IntelliJ if you're coming from there. You can choose ReSharper shortcuts, just the default Rider, etc. So I went with Visual Studio because that's what I'm comfortable with and used to. As with anything, you can customize and change any one of, I don't say any one because I don't know if that's true or not, but you can change the majority of the actions, keyboards, strokes, mouse strokes throughout the application. The editor, you probably won't change off the top of that, but you might play around with it after you start using it for a bit. I didn't touch the editor at all. This is the one area that Rider is lacking from Visual Studio, and that's mostly not because there's any limitations with Rider, but just the long history of Visual Studio versus Rider. There's not a lot of extensions and plugins, but from what I found, you don't really need a lot of them. Because Rider includes a lot of the stuff that you would typically add, or at least that I typically have added in the past, like ReSharper, some debugging tools, and then some interactions with Azure and other places. Here, these are the ones that I already have installed. They're highlighted here with the install, or I can just click on the install. Some of these are out of the box. Some of them I've installed afterwards, like Azure Toolkit for Rider. These here are the ones that I installed. I did this .ignore, which has a lot of built-in Git ignore files or other type of ignores. Azure DevOps, this allows me to do a lot of stuff straight from within the IDE, just like you could in Visual Studio and others. The Azure Toolkit, key promoter, you probably don't need for the most part. I put it on here because I like to use the keyboard when I code as much as possible. Keyboard Promoter is an actually pretty clever plugin. It looks to see if you're repeating keys over and over again, or sorry, if you're repeating mouse clicks over and over again, it will show you if there's a keyboard shortcut in there. And you'll watch it pop up a little bit as I start showing you different pieces of Rider. Oh, and I accidentally hit the escape key. So let me go back to preferences. And plugins. Markdown is because I do a lot of Markdown editing for GitHub. My personal blog is done through MarkHub. And then this Markdown Navigator, which right now is disabled. One of the really big selling points for me in Rider, besides the most obvious, which is it's cross-platform, because I do both Mac and Windows laptops, is the database tools and SQL. This by far is one of the biggest features that I see in it. This allows you to connect to virtually any database. I haven't found one yet that it doesn't support. We'll kind of walk through that. Without any other extensions, it's just native in here. I believe it takes it from its existing database product called DataGrip that allows you to access any database. But this has it built right into the IDE. There's built-in support for Dogger, Vagrant, FHTP, and a bunch of other language tools all built in. Like I mentioned yesterday in Visual Studio Code portion, part of its power is the ability to grow the ecosystem by just adding in additional plugins for support. So you notice all their version controls here are bundled in, and it gives you the ability to do it. I only have Git and GitHub enabled. I don't use Mercurial, Perforce, or Subversion, so I disable them just to save additional resources. These are other editors that are just bundled in. For your version control, you can set some defaults. So here you would typically see my connection to Azure. I deleted it just prior to this. If you have GitHub credentials, they'll be listed here. Not the user ID passwords, but just the established connections to it. That allows you to be able to seamlessly have that integration between GitHub or Azure DevOps or whatever your local store is. And then I believe that is really it for the basics as far as configuration. So let's go through the new solution experience a little bit. When you click on new solution, you'll be prompted, which initially looks like a very confusing dialog box. One of the things I also like about Rider is that your ability to change just about every window. In Visual Studio, some of the limitations from it being around so long is that the windows are fixed dialog boxes, so there's a lot of scrolling. Here you can resize it to your heart's content. This is very similar to Visual Studio, but it's also quite unique is that it shows you everything in one screen, whereas Visual Studio prompts you through different pieces of code. If you're using Visual Studio Code, everything is through a command line, so you don't really see a UI. But the great thing is that the user experience changes based on the product that you're selecting. So here I want to select a unit test project, and I get all the basic options without having to go through different screens. Template author, this is just where this one happens to come from. Create a solution name. project name, directory where you want it from. Again, I put this as my default for all projects because that's the root I use it in. You'll notice it says C:\/ because the last time I opened up Writer or within my settings is on a Windows box, but it's smart enough to know the difference to convert from C:\/ to tilde/projects. It allows you to also create a Git repository. Since Git is the only one I have registered on the machine, that's the option it's going to give me. By default, because this is a .NET Core project, it's going to choose the latest version, but I can go and select which one I have or which one I want. And this will pick from all the different versions of .NET I have installed on my machine. Pick the type of project, whether it's NUnit, XUnit, etc. These are the 3 that are installed, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through physically creating a project. I'm actually going to open up an existing one to walk through some of the IDE. So, we looked at what did we look at yesterday? Oh, the eShop on the web. So I'm going to pull that one up so we can see the difference. So we can pull it up here as a physical project / solution or a folder. Let's go back and pull it up as a folder just to show the slight differences with it. We can always come back and open it up as a solution. The only real difference is going to be its Solution Explorer, how it shows you items. Before we talk about this dialog box, you'll notice that within my Writer opening screen window, I have 2 projects that are red. These are projects that it actually can't find anymore because I actually moved them from the box, so I'll at one point have the ability to go back and delete them. So because we opened up the eShop on the web project as a folder, it says, hey, you have a solution here. Do you want to open it up as a solution, or do you want to open up as a directory? Let's just open it up as a directory for now. Then we'll come back and open it up as a solution. So in a minute or so, it's going to load its components and be ready for us to actually edit the project. So you notice the IDE looks very different and very bare bones. It took a minimalist approach to it to hide most of the stuff. Some of it I actually did myself, so your appearance might slightly vary. No menu, just like in Visual Studio, because it uses the Mac menu, which you can't see right now on my screen because I'm zoomed in. Here it tells you that we are looking at the file system. We can take an assemblies view, which is just going to show that, but essentially you get a glorified Finder window or Solution Explorer. One of the cool things about Writer is because we opened it up, it recognized there was a README file. It automatically pulls up that README file, which is really helpful if you're getting a project from scratch from a Git repo. It'll automatically show you that README. And this is the README transformed. I can click here to show the editor view and not the compiled version. Everything else as far as navigation is pretty similar. We have icons with the file extension. If I click on a file extension, I get, as I would expect, color coding. You can change the types of files. Where is it? There is a section where you can change the type. I'll have to find that for the next one. A lot of my windows are minimized because I was trying to provide full real estate. Let's open up a source file for now, and then we'll see some of the source code editing. So we started off yesterday's with base entities, so to see the difference here. You're not going to notice much difference. My configuration is very similar in both environments. A couple of different things. You have the Git lens that I had as an add-on. Here it's built in and shown right above it. So right now Steve Smith was the last author of this. If I click on this, it's actually going to show me the IL code, or intermediate language code, that will give me what .NET will actually create for this. I get the same if you're familiar with ReSharper Jump to light bulb menu that gives me different options within here. As far as the rest of the IDE is concerned, there's no drop downs for the multiple different types. Again, everything is keyboard centric for me, so we would end up using keyboards to navigate. Here we have a play menu, debug, and stop, as well as what we're looking to do. We can do sampling, tracing, or timeline. I'm not going to really run any of the projects right now. And then because Git is our source code repository, we have Git options here to pull down the latest, do a commit, check the history, and then this allows me to run it. Here I can take the typical Visual Studio build configurations. Because I have this open as a file folder, we're not going to get a lot of that out of the box running ability. So let's go and open that as a solution. Easiest way to do that is to pull up the menu and not click it too fast because it went away. Click open, do open solution, or Control Shift O, and I'm going to choose eSolution on the web. You'll notice some of this stuff is different. Within within Rider, it allows you to navigate between different projects using different windows, or I can keep this in the same window. By default, it's going to say this window, so it's going to keep this copy of Rider open and then reload the solution into this window. Or I can choose new window, and it creates a separate instance of Rider and allows you to open it. For sake of ease and for the stream, I'm just going to choose this window. Chat's pretty quiet today. Is anyone even here? There's one person listed in the chat at least. Okay, IDE is slightly different now, you'll notice. Up top, we have debug, because it realizes that there are some solutions in this project, and I have a debug and release configuration. And then because the web project is set as the default project, this gives me the ability to execute it if I hit run. The Git menu is the same. Notice another window popped up on the bottom. This is what I like to call the tools, or the I need to have on all the time while I get familiar with the project set of windows. So you just got a pop up from the notifications window saying you may have to set up Docker deployment run, because it detected a Docker Compose set of files in here, and it's giving me the option of potentially getting that ready. It's showing me NuGet by default because that was the last window I had open. So it right now is going through and checking all the solution, all the packages I have in the solution, and then ultimately will find the version. So right now I have installed in the solution version 1.3. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Let me go and change that. Good idea, Robert. He mentioned that I should probably change the font. I forget that I'm presenting here and that a lot of people are usually at their desktop, so I don't have to worry about the size of the font. So let me see. That will only do part of it. Hopefully that'll be good for the most part. If I need to go bigger, I can go bigger. So here NuGet's telling me that I am in version 1.3.1, but 1.4.2 is available. Here is a quick search where I can search for both public as well as internal NuGet sources. Here's a list of all the sources that I have registered in this solution, or I can look at any given project. Here are the sources based on my local workstation. I only have one. If you were in any of previous streams, you might have seen I registered some of the other package providers globally. I took them out for the purpose of this demo. And then folders will show different folders where it will look to it, as well as log. You notice also, you can't see it over here, and I should probably move my face out of the way. Let me do this and move it out of the way for now. Come back in a minute. I don't want to move that. Get back here. Control Z. I want to move you. So here you'll notice different numbers as well as icons. These are shortcuts to execute it. So if I did the command key on a Mac and chose 9, it would open up that window. You'll notice Key Promoter also popped up that said, hey, you should press the command key and the 9 to show that window. So this will just show me my Git history, which is actually a lot. Granted, this is not my project, but you'll see the whole history of it, as well as any forks that were made, branches that were made. You can blame, create pull requests, all from within here. And there's similar windows for unit tests as well as performers. The ToDo Items tab is really cool. I actually have a plugin in Visual Studio Code that does this for me that I use a lot. If you have Visual Studio proper or professional, ReSharper has this ability built into it where you can get the to-dos. Essentially, this goes through your code base and looks for keywords. You can customize this, but for this particular one, it's looking for any comment with the word to do in it, and this allows me quick access to just single click on it and get right to it. And you can scope it and change it all around. You can also edit the settings. If I click here, I can go and add additional items to it, go directly to the settings to go and modify it. One of the other cool features of JetBrains Rider is this scratches and consoles. So sometimes you write quick code, sometimes it's a quick database query, sometimes it's just a HTTP request that you want to send when you're testing your web app out, but you don't want to necessarily put it in a unit test or check it into your version repository. This scratches and consoles allows you to do that. And you can do pretty much anything in here. Right now, there are a couple of predefined ones inside the database extensions, but these are ones that I have. So for one of my personal projects that I've been working on, event meetups, I have a scratch list of HTTP requests that I want to make, and I can click on the play and it will run that test. That allows me to actually do it. Yes, you can do it in Postman. I can also do it in SQL Server. This allows me to have a bunch of them all together. And they're tied to the IDE. They're not tied to the solution at all. And I got history around them too, so I can review the request and response. Can do the same thing with database tables. I can run C# code. If you've looked at something like a link pad, you can execute bits of pieces of C# code. It's a really powerful feature to it, and it works with just about every tool that you can install within here. The other cool feature is the database prompt. You see this is starting to tell me that, hey, you should use Shift Command 3 to open up databases. Right now within this project, I have no database source. So I click plus, I can go and add. And out of the box, these are all the different data sources that you can connect to. Amazon Redshift, Apache Cassandra, H2, IBM DB2, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL Server, and the list goes on. And there are other plugins available to increase your data store. And that's where the import data sources come from. You can also check to see all the different drivers you have from here. So let's say I wanted to connect to a SQL Server instance. Let's click on that. It'll prompt me with the dialog box, which looks very similar to the file new. Have a bunch of options. Here it's saying, oh, you're in development ID, so most likely you want to connect to localhost. So I'm going to name one localhost for you, and by default, put in the localhost password. And I'm not going to go and fill this out because I didn't actually run the Docker instance. But you can see no matter what the IDE is, or no matter what the database is, there's a UI that's similar to it. This one is showing as red because I don't have any Oracle drivers on my machine because I don't deal with Oracle. But Rider is smart enough to say, hey, you can go and get the latest version from here. No, DynamoDB is not included in the box, but I believe there is a plugin. If I go to here and do drivers and data sources, it was away. It might be in their plugin repository to be able to download it. But as you see, it's super flexible and allows you to do it. If you use the ReSharper unit test coverage, they have the same kind of panel in here that allows you to go and create your unit test. I do also like this favorites piece that allows you to bookmark different things. So any breakpoints I commonly choose, any projects, because I've opened up this project 3 or 4 times on Rider, it says, oh, this must be one of your favorites. Any pinned items, so if I pin a tab or pin a window, they'll show them here to me. Structure will show me the structure of an application once I'm actually in one. This is very good if you have a very busy domain object or business layer that's all over the place. The Azure Explorer is also pretty neat. It allows you to work with just about every Azure resource. Pretty much anything that has exposed via the Azure Resource Manager REST API. Once I sign in, I'll see access to all my containers, SQL databases, and such. So let's take a quick sign in for it. Let's see if this pops up on this window. It's telling me I'm going to go and I need to enter code blah blah blah. It's opening up on a different window because user ID, password kind of stuff. Enter a code. I'm pasting the code in and it should give me the authentication to it. This will go away once it's good. The authentication is here. Now it's going through and it's getting a list of all my Azure objects. It says, which subscription do I want to pull in? With some caveats. Let's pull in just that one for this demo. This is a separate subscription that I have from Microsoft that gives me certain Azure credits for demos. And it doesn't go and load everything automatically. It loads it once you click on it. It's enough of that one. I'm not going to really go through that in any more detail. Let's see, at the bottom, nothing here we want to talk about. Let's see, the menu has a lot of common things, so if you go and download and try it out, I would at least walk through the navigation to go through keyboard shortcuts and those. There's also a PDF available on the JetBrains site that allows you to get the out of the box kind of keyboard codes so you can look at them and do. But it has basic refactoring. I shouldn't say basic. It's basic for me because I've been using JetBrains ReSharper forever, but the typical ReSharper commands, the ability to build solutions, run it, test, tools. Here they added a couple other useful tools. The Azure one is that plugin I showed before. Task and context allows us to have different servers. NuGet, we kind of saw that window here. I'm not going to cover any of them in great detail. The one I do want to bring up is this HTTP client. I kind of alluded to it a little bit with the Scratch HTTP client, but this has a built-in HTTP client that allows you to go out, make calls, process responses, which is really good when you're doing local testing or building out an API to a third-party service. You don't want to have to build test cases to it or a dummy project that does it. This allows you to do that pretty quickly. And then your version control items right here, typical Windows menu, and help. That is pretty much Rider in a nutshell. If you want more information on it, you can go to JetBrains.com/Rider, I believe. See if I got it right. Yeah, I got it right. And this is the URL for it. Again, free 30-day trial. I'm only bringing it up because I wanted to compare it with, not necessarily compare it, this wasn't a battle, but an introduction, because throughout the stream I'm going to be using a combination of Visual Studio Code, and Rider for the demos. So that's it for the stream. Any questions and or comments? Video for this will be posted later on today onto YouTube as well as Twitter and other social media. Thanks all again. Please follow me Twitter on JoeG, my blog for a lot of posts around this content, as well as on Facebook at josephguadagno.net. Thanks for your time.